what are reasonable accommodations? Why do they matter?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, reasonable accommodations, for me, are these any adjustment or support that the organization is offering to you so that you can work to your fullest potential. Now, imagine if I really talk about a very simple example from people who have very heights, we have this height adjustable chair, right? And you could adjust the height to best suit you and to make it most productive for yourself, right? And you could adjust your desk and you could kind of do a lot of adjustment. Similarly, when you hire a person with disability, you could, we all do things differently. Some are visual in nature, auditory in nature, more, experiential in nature. People with disability may have a different own ways of doing it. For me, in my case, I use audio and I use technologies like text to speech to help me work. Now, when I go and work and I ask to my employer, hey, thanks for offering me the job. But, for me to be the fullest of myself, I need these few accommodation. The first of it being this software called JAWS. It's a paid license that you need to acquire for me. And then a few other accommodation, for example.
Ankit, just give me a second. Can you please mute, right, in case anybody's unmuted. Back to you, Ankit. Sorry about this.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you were talking about.
Okay. I was saying, so when I go and I talk to my employer during my interviews, and when they ask me, okay, what support do I need? I would definitely call out, okay, I would need the screen reader. That's a technology level. I often ask for transport. Okay, I would need the company to provide me for transport. And this is an interesting discussion point we could kind of dwell on a little later. Then, of course, nowadays I've also kind of requested for some AI tools like Copilot. And again, it's been a great enabler for me. And also a few other things. Now, these are, of course, the most easier or the visible one. What also happens is these accommodation also extends to sometimes your work and responsibility. And I will give you a very interesting example. When I joined Wipro from campus in 2011, of course, I aced the interview and I was hired for marketing. But the marketing manager asked me, hey, how could you manage this? It's a very visual role. And what I did is that I opened the JD. There were 11 tasks listed in that JD. And I said, hey, you know what? Out of these 11, I could do 8 to 9 without any difficulty and I don't need any support. There are these two areas which has a lot of... okay, now my echo. Okay, great. So there are these two tasks which probably requires a lot of visual interpretation of, for me to able to see that. And I said, hey, I don't want you to reduce that load on me. If you are comfortable, why don't you swap these two roles or responsibility with somebody else in the team? So if there is a thing that requires me to view or review things visually, that can be managed by a teammate. And in return, I can actually do something else. You can increase my work responsibility by more things. So that's how the concept for me has really worked throughout the career. There are things as far as technology, as far as infrastructure, and also even workplace or a work roles and responsibility accommodations that I've received.
So, let me move to you, Mugdha. Right, as at Chalet Hotels, it would be great if you can tell me that as an employer, your perspective on reasonable accommodations, what you believe, how do you make them in your organization?
Okay, so first of all, I believe accommodations as an organization, we have to do for everybody. It's not only for PwD candidates or workforce. We have to adjust to one's strengths and weaknesses and play on their strengths for everybody in their workforce. So I think they're very important for any successful business. When it comes to from a PwD perspective, I think it kind of starts from the budgeting exercise, because if we are going to introduce the PwD into the workforce, then we have to budget slightly differently. So it begins there. The interview criteria are a little different. In fact, their performance criteria are different, so that they just don't keep doing the same job that they are doing. And they actually have a growth path in there. So their performance criteria, their career paths defined, they are all different. And like Ankit spoke about technology, we have to kind of support them with certain technological assessments, and then accessibility to different areas that we have to build, which actually being in hotels, it's easier for us because, being a 5-star hotel anyway requires you to give accessibility. So that part comes easy in our business, but rest of it, yes, we have to work on.
You said that the interview process is different, right? Now, I can tell you from experience that this is not an insight that either folks, who are from the PwD segment or even human resource leaders have, right? So if you can tell us, a little more about how this process is done, it'll be fabulous.
So there are two types of interviews that happen. One in where we actually approach the organizations and we know that these candidates are going to have certain special, they are candidates with PwD. There are certain times where we have walk-ins, where we don't know that particular candidates need certain accommodations. So I'm talking about the process where we are ready. We kind of have a sensitization training for the person who takes the interview, so that they are accommodative, they are warm, they know exactly what to expect, and you're not making somebody feel out of place. I think that is very important to kind of portray that we are an inclusive workforce, and to ensure that you're giving them the confidence that yes, we will help you support during your growth. The other adjustment what I can talk about is done differently is, for example, one of the characteristics that is there in an interview sheet is, say, communication. So how do you rate that, or what is an acceptable standard to get that job? That will vary for the PwD versus somebody who is not a PwD. So these are the kind of adjustments that we do and how we do it differently. Plus, when they walk through, they will see the accessibility. We make sure that we make them feel that you could go wherever you want to. There's nothing. So that accessibility feeling is given. We kind of focus on these things, which usually would have just ignored.
Understood. So that for the person with disabilities, who are there on this podcast today and who may listen to it later as well, what kind of accommodations can they ask for, right? What is acceptable, and would really love your perspective on it.
I don't think I can draw a clear line on what is acceptable and what is not. It will completely depend on situations and the job role. What I would say is, a business will support this kind of fashion if the business exists. So if that adjustment can be done without affecting the business, then it's a reasonable accommodation to ask. For example, say we have somebody who's a PwD who kind of is in housekeeping, for example. When one person can probably do 15 rooms, say this person can do 12 rooms, do we have to attach a trainee there, which is easily doable in a big hotel? But if it's a small hotel where manpower is a constraint and it will affect my business numbers, I may kind of not be able to do it there. So I will do it in my bigger hotel. So there is a way that you can find around. And I think as long as the business is not affected, everything is reasonable.
Ankit, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely I'm in alignment to Mugdha. I think business is important because the whole purpose of existence would remain if the business is healthy. Having said that, I think from a person with disability, I think we should be aware and should always be kind of having some alternate options. I always approach such exercise or such discussions on reasonable accommodation as a negotiation. So let's go back to JAWS, right? Like if I kind of put in a table, on table that, hey, I need JAWS. And the company says, hey, we are very small, we are a startup and we probably don't have budget to acquire this 60,000-70,000 rupee license for you for now. Is there something else that we can do? So then I, of course, know that there's NVDA. And of course, for me, the challenge or the opportunity is to be kind of equipped and be ready and be workforce ready with that kind of a tool, right? So yes, I think that's something that I've kind of scaled up where I'm pretty much okay with, say, NVDA, JAWS or VoiceOver. You give me the platform and I will kind of manage. And that's a personal learning, right? And all these upskilling helps us to be ready for a situation where, say, a company is not able to afford something like this. Having said that, if I always given a choice, I always kind of ask for my preferred software, which is JAWS. And that's how I've kind of guided many of my many other mentees who kind of come to me earlier in the career and they ask, okay, how do I kind of ask about JAWS? And especially, and this is a question more relevant for companies who are early in the journey. It's a startup phase. They don't have adequate money. For larger organizations like Entity Data, Wipro, Infosys, I think they already have a huge software budget. And for them to kind of accommodate a JAWS license is not a very big expenditure. So, but yes, it's important. As I said, you need to have alternatives because sometimes your request can have an implication on the business, and then we need to approach it more positively and look at what the other alternatives are.
Understood. Would it be fair for me to say that accommodation is a two-way street?
Absolutely, it's a two-way street. Yes, by the letter of the law, employers cannot say no unless it causes an undue hardship. I think even in India, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act is very clear on this. Having said that, we also need to be aware, okay, yes, what are our area strengths? What do we bring to the table? Say someone who's very early in the career, probably the company may also think twice. But I think it's important that we need to be aware of what are the options are, what are different ways, and how do I keep upskilling myself so that I kind of blend in seamlessly. I don't have to think twice for the fact that, hey, you don't have to be ashamed or unsure of the fact that, hey, I'm causing a lot of burden to the company. Please do not have that attitude at all. You are also contributing to the company, and as Mugdha said, when you are accommodating many other personalities and in the organization, accommodating you also is a business benefit for them. But also you need to be mindful and see what are the other alternate ways of kind of managing and working around. It just kind of shows your agility.
Let me put up a question, right? And maybe Mugdha, let me start with Ankit on this actually. If I'm a disabled person, Ankit, do I mention my disability on my resume? And do I do it during the interview or do I do it later? What do you think?
I think this is a very personal question. It depends on people to people. Some of us like to kind of mention it right up on the resume. Some like to kind of disclose down the journey, and some for who probably it's not a deal breaker, probably they may not even disclose this. So I think it's a choice that people have. Personally, for me, I don't have my disability prominently mentioned in my resume, But if there's a employment form that I'm filling, and when there is a section on self-identification, I definitely make sure that I kind of fill in the appropriate response. I do disclose my disability and whatever questions are being asked there. But in my resume, probably it doesn't there. But of course, there are many other subtle ways where people could see how, which is kind of mentioned there. I like to kind of start with what I have achieved and what I bring to the table and not my disability, because that's a part of my personality and that's not my primary thing that I bring. I bring value to the employer, and that's how I like to lead the discussion. And yes, in the process of employment and accommodation, there are different conversations and requirement being discussed, and at that point of time, I don't shy away for asking.
And Mugdha, maybe you could call out pros and cons of mentioning it and not mentioning it, and we see Ankit's son in the background. Yeah. So sorry, back to the question. So Mugdha, maybe you could highlight pros and cons and share your perspective on this topic.
Sure. I completely agree with Ankit that it's a complete personal choice. It should be left to the candidate to decide. But if you ask me, I am a very strong advocate of early disclosures, because see, there are companies who would support you and there are companies who would not support you. So the companies who would support you would irrespective support you if you disclose, and probably you would perform better. The support that you would get from beginning, the accommodations that you would get, it would only help you perform better. For companies who don't want to support you, even if there is no disclosure, they would find ways later on so that it is a deal breaker for you. So that is why I'm a very strong advocate of, you should disclose it, but it's a personal choice.
How does one handle bias and discrimination? Many folks on this call and who'll watch this later would have been through it, and I'm sure that we've all lived through bias in some form, but some bias is a little rougher than others, right? So I would love to hear your perspective on how to handle bias, and how does one really bridge that trust deficit?
Sure. Can I go first, Ankit?
Yes, please.
Okay, so sometimes people know that they're biased. Most of the times they don't know that they're biased. That's where we've heard about, conscious and unconscious bias. Having said that, sometimes it's not bias, it's just the fear of not knowing how to deal with somebody who's a little different in the workforce, because it's new to a lot of employees. Whereas on the other side, for some of our employees are way more caring towards the PwD candidates. That also creates a bias. While some of them are scared, some of them are way too accommodating. That is also not nice. So I think it is very important for you to kind of understand where is this different behavior stemming from, and you should definitely address it upfront, calmly. Don't just take it wrong, because sometimes most of the times the intentions might be good, or they might not even know that there is a bias. So while you should address it firmly, you should do it calmly and nicely, at least in the first few instances. And then if you kind of notice that there are certain people or certain groups where you see a pattern and it's happening repeatedly and it's affecting you, that is when the organization is always there to support you. But it's very important that you highlight and handle it first. Otherwise, we are always there. That's what my take is. Bias
is a very big topic, and it probably requires a big podcast on its own, where I'm not going to give a chance to Alok and others to speak. But, just to kind of keep it true to the spirit of reasonable accommodation, and just a few things, right? I think, Mugdha, you covered it right from the other side, the manager side of it. Let's just see it from an employee side of it, right? and I will just say, hey, like as Mugdha said, probably they are not biased. A lot of it is also misinformation, sometimes lack of information. We need to be open about talking about our condition, our situation. I've often seen this tension between, often the managers and the disabled employee, where they don't want to ask about it because they're fearful of hurting you, and you don't want to ask it because you feel कि hey यार कितना मैं रोता रहूंगा हमेशा, so you don't want to kind of come across something like that. But it's important that if there's an opportunity and if there's a situation where you are not comfortable, or if you see a certain pattern happening repeatedly, it's never a bad idea to go and talk to your manager or a colleague. Hey, this is what I spotted this, you're doing this repeatedly, and probably this makes me uncomfortable. If there is a situation that makes you uncomfortable, or if there is something that you want to guide them or advise them, you could always say, hey, probably you could try doing this. And maybe that will open up a very nice conversation and will bring in a perspective, because most often or not, the manager or your colleague will say, hey, I never thought about it. So I think we also need to be a little more aware of it. Bias can creep in so many places. Work roles, responsibility, pay grades, and many other things. So I think those are very different conversations that I would not want to do it. I personally have been very lucky to have employers, be it my current employer, NCT Data, or all my previous employers, where in generally there's been a larger acceptance on listening to you. And I'm particularly very blunt if I don't like something, and I've kind of shot down several ideas, especially like even when, for example, I'm the global lead for Access ERG, and sometimes several suggestions come, and they come from the right heart and the right mind, but again, probably they're not the right thing to be done. And I often have to kind of shoot them down, sometimes politely, sometimes bluntly. But yes, it's important to be sure of, to be confident in your own skin. You have a disability, you don't have something, you've not done a crime. So don't feel ashamed of it. Many of us do that. Like I myself have grown through this journey. And we're not, where earlier in my career, I would also shy away talking about it. It was very difficult. I always tried to fit in to the quote unquote the normal realm. But the sooner I realized that, I think I have my own identity, I have my own space, and I bring value. It's not a favor that they're doing to me. And what I'm asking for, be it for accommodation or for being treated in a certain way, is not wrong. I think it opens up a great conversation and a doorway for respect for yourself also.